Have you ever witnessed a moment so shocking, so utterly unforgettable, that it burned itself into your memory forever? Imagine this: a brand new teacher walks into a classroom full of wild, arrogant bullies who think they own the place. They laugh at her, mock her, and even dare to push the limits of respect in ways no teacher should endure. Everyone thinks she will break down, cry, or beg for control. But then, right in front of the entire class, something happens that no one could have imagined. A single spinning kick, a strike so precise, so lightning fast, that the room falls into stunned silence. That one moment changes everything, not just for her, but for the bullies, for the students, and for the entire school. And if you stay with me until the end of this story, you will feel the shock, the justice, and the triumph as if you were right there in the room when it happened. The morning sun poured lazily into Maplewood High School, its golden light bouncing off the polished windows that lined the main hallway. Inside, the air buzzed with chatter, laughter, and the usual rhythm of a new academic year. Students carried their books, cliques huddled in corners, and the scent of fresh paper mixed with cafeteria coffee drifted faintly in the background. But beneath the normality of that day lurked a tension that every student in Class 10B understood far too well. Their class had become the hunting ground of a gang of notorious bullies. And no one, neither teachers nor students, had yet found the courage to stop them. Their leader was a tall, broad-shouldered boy named Damien. With a smirk that never seemed to fade and a voice that could silence a room, Damien had become the unchallenged king of mischief and fear. Around him hovered his loyal crew: Mason, always chewing gum and cracking knuckles as if waiting for a fight; Troy, whose laughter was as cruel as his pranks; and Kyle, the quiet one with piercing eyes, who rarely spoke but always acted when Damien commanded. Together, they ruled the classroom like tyrants. Every new substitute teacher lasted only a week, sometimes a day. The bullies mocked lessons, destroyed homework, hurled insults, and once even managed to glue a teacher's chair to the floor. The students had grown used to chaos. And so, when whispers spread that a new teacher would be joining them that Monday, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. "Another lamb to the slaughter," Troy snickered, tossing a paper ball across the room. "How long do you think she'll last?" 2 days, Mason said confidently. "No one survives us longer than that." Damien leaned back in his chair, feet stretched arrogantly onto his desk, his smirk sharper than ever. "Forget 2 days. I'll have her walking out before lunch." The rest of the class exchanged nervous glances. They wanted to hope, to believe that maybe this new teacher could be different, but experience had taught them otherwise. The bullies were simply too powerful. Yet, at the same time, a quiet curiosity brewed inside them. Then, the classroom door creaked open. She walked in. Ms. Elena Hart. At first glance, she did not look like the kind of woman who could challenge a room full of rebellious teenagers. She was young, no more than 25, with long auburn hair tied neatly back and eyes that gleamed with both warmth and an intensity few could name. Dressed in a simple blouse and skirt, she carried nothing but a leather-bound notebook and a calm expression. She did not raise her voice. She did not fumble nervously. Instead, she stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and let her gaze sweep across the classroom with a steady confidence that unsettled even the boldest students. "Good morning," she said softly, yet her voice carried, clear as a bell. "I'm Ms. Hart, your new teacher." For a brief moment, silence hung in the air. The students shifted in their seats, unsure of how to respond. Then, as expected, Damien leaned forward, his smirk widening. "Good morning, Ms. Hart," he mocked, dragging out her name with exaggerated sweetness. His crew snickered, and the classroom tension cracked. But Ms. Hart did not flinch. Instead, she smiled slightly, as though she had been waiting for this exact reaction. "I see," she replied calmly. "So this is how Class 10B greets their teacher." Her words were not sharp, not scolding, but they carried a subtle edge that made even some students sit straighter. Yet Damien was far from intimidated. He tapped his fingers against his desk and narrowed his eyes. "You'll be gone by Friday," he declared. "We don't keep teachers here. They run away." The class gasped softly at his brazenness, but Ms. Hart's smile remained. "Is that so?" she asked, tilting her head as though he had just made an amusing observation. "Then maybe it's time someone broke the pattern." The words, simple as they were, struck the classroom differently than anyone expected. There was no fear in her tone, no trembling hesitation. Just quiet assurance. Damien's smirk faltered for a moment before he quickly covered it with laughter. "You'll regret saying that, lady." And thus, the battle began. For the next half hour, Ms. Hart tried to begin her lesson. She wrote on the board, spoke clearly, asked questions, but each attempt was met with jeers, interruptions, and mocking comments from Damien's gang. Mason threw paper airplanes at her when her back was turned. Troy imitated her voice in a ridiculous falsetto, making the class burst into laughter. Kyle muttered crude jokes under his breath, earning approving nods from his friends. The atmosphere thickened with chaos, and for a moment, it seemed like the bullies would win yet again. But Ms. Hart never raised her voice. She did not threaten, did not plead. Instead, she observed. She let them push, let them laugh, let them test her patience, all while her eyes remained steady, calm, watchful. The students noticed the unusual lack of panic. Normally, by now, a substitute would be sweating or yelling or storming out. But Ms. Hart was different. Something about her stillness felt dangerous, though no one could quite explain why. Finally, the moment came. Damien, emboldened by her silence, decided to cross the final line. Rising from his chair, he strolled casually up to her desk, standing just inches away. His grin widened as he leaned forward, pretending to glance at her notes, but then, without warning, his hand snapped out and slapped her behind. The class erupted in shock. Gasps, nervous laughter, and whispers filled the air. This was beyond the usual pranks, beyond cruel words. This was open disrespect, and everyone braced themselves for Ms. Hart to break, to scream, to cry, to storm out like all the others. But what happened next stunned them all. In a blur faster than anyone could process, Ms. Hart pivoted on her heel. Her auburn hair whipped through the air as her body twisted with precise, practiced motion. And then, wham! Her leg extended in a flawless spinning kick, striking Damien squarely in the chest. The sound echoed through the classroom like a thunderclap. His body lifted slightly from the force before crashing backward onto the floor, his chair clattering loudly beside him. Silence. Utter, absolute silence filled the room. The students stared with wide eyes, mouths agape, as Damien, the untouchable, unstoppable leader of the bullies, lay sprawled on the ground, groaning in disbelief. Ms. Hart straightened her posture, her expression calm but her eyes blazing with controlled fire. She looked around the room, meeting every gaze, and said in a voice that carried no doubt, "Respect is not optional in my classroom." Not a single sound followed. Even Troy, Mason, and Kyle, who usually leapt to Damien's defense, were frozen in place, their faces pale. The class that had once been ruled by chaos now sat in stunned silence, their perception of the new teacher forever changed. And that was the moment it all began. The story of how one woman turned fear into respect, how courage shattered arrogance, and how a single spinning kick shocked an entire school. But little did they know, that was only the beginning. Because the bullies were not done, and Ms. Hart had secrets of her own that no one could have imagined, the classroom buzzed in stunned silence after Damien fell. Every student's mind spun, struggling to process what they had just seen. The untouchable bully, the one who had tormented teachers and classmates alike, had been brought down with a single strike. Ms. Hart stood tall, her chest rising and falling slowly, her expression calm as if nothing unusual had happened. To her, it wasn't a scene of violence, it was discipline, justice, and a message. But to the students, it was nothing short of legendary. Damien groaned, clutching his chest as he pushed himself off the floor. His face burned with humiliation, more painful than the physical blow itself. For the first time, he had been made a fool of in front of his kingdom. His eyes, once filled with arrogant amusement, now flickered with something darker, hatred. "You'll regret that," he hissed under his breath, his voice trembling with rage. Ms. Hart did not flinch. She leaned slightly toward him, her voice so calm it chilled everyone listening. "Then you'd better think very carefully before trying again." She turned back to the board and continued her lesson as if nothing had happened. The sheer normalcy of her behavior made it even more shocking. No shouting, no threats, no panic, just focus. The students sat straighter, pens in hand, listening intently, afraid to miss a word. For the first time in years, Class 10B was silent and attentive. But beneath the quiet, storms brewed. That afternoon, Damien sat with his crew under the bleachers, his fists clenched tightly. Mason spat gum onto the ground angrily. She embarrassed you in front of everyone. No one's ever done that before. Troy growled. We can't just let this go. If word spreads, we'll be the laughingstock of the whole school. People are already talking. Kyle, who had been quiet, finally spoke. She's not like the others. Did you see her move? That wasn't random. She's trained. Damien's jaw tightened. His pride screamed for revenge, but Kyle's words unsettled him. That kick hadn't been sloppy, it had been precise, sharp, controlled. Whoever Ms. Hart was, she wasn't just a teacher. I don't care if she's trained, Damien snapped. No one humiliates me. We'll show her who runs this place. His words carried venom, but deep down, for the first time in years, a flicker of fear gnawed at him.